Swallowtail, Chapter 3. Paul stood in the doorway with a toolbox in his hand. He was still in his scrubs, his face lined with concern. "You okay, honey?" "Something was chasing me." Claire sat up in bed, her heart still racing. Paul frowned. "You're home early." "You were sleeping so soundly, I didn't want to wake you." He looked so handsome, still tanned from summer. His dark curly hair was turning more salt and pepper. Claire found it incredibly sexy, and kept meaning to tell him, but she always forgot. After 14 years, she was slacking when it came to compliments. "Paul," Claire began, suddenly remembering her morning at the bank. "I got a letter for you, Mom," Em shouted, brushing past Paul. A small blue note was folded in half and safety pinned to her little mermaid sweatshirt. She had a rumpled macaroni jack-o'-lantern glued to orange construction paper clenched in one fist, and a half-eaten Pop-Tart in the other. Claire grinned and held her arms out, letting her hair fall across her face, hoping to hide her puffy eyes. Em climbed up on the white down comforter and fell into Claire's arms. "You sick?" "Just a cold, I think," Claire sniffled and rubbed her nose. "I could use some snuggle time. I think I need a popcorn night." "Yeah, popcorn," Em agreed. "I'm on it," Paul said with a wink and headed downstairs before Claire had a chance to tell him anything, or even ask him what he'd been doing with the toolbox. "Movie night," Em shouted. She was wearing her red mermaid wig cocked to one side. Her Pop-Tart was crumbling all over the bed, but Claire didn't care. "Want some?" Em asked. Yeah." Claire realized she hadn't eaten a thing all day and was surprised when it didn't taste half bad. "Nice jack-o'-lantern. Should we hang it up?" "I don't care. It's dumb. I wanted to make bats. The boys got to make bats. It's not fair." "Oh, I'll make bats with you. We can do it right here on the bed tonight, while we watch movies." "What's the note say?" "No vampires, I think." "No vampires? Why not?" Claire asked, removing the note from Em's shirt. "Because vampires drink blood, and we can't wear a costume with any blood and no weapons." The note read, "Dear Mrs. Cummings, with your permission, I would like to have a speech therapist work with Emmy on Tuesdays and Thursdays after school. Please give me a call, Mrs. Meyer." "Well, I like vampires," Claire said, wadding up the note and tossing it into the wastebasket next to the nightstand. "Me too, but I like mermaids better." "I love you, Em. Give Mommy another hug," she said, tearing up as she kissed Em's cheek and squeezed her too hard. "Mom, you're choking me." Em squealed with laughter and dropped the rest of her Pop-Tart. Shadow swooped in like a hawk out of nowhere and inhaled the pastry the second it hit the floor. "You wouldn't have had room for dinner anyway, even if it is just popcorn. Daddy let you into the Pop-Tarts right after school again?" "Nope, Anna," Em whispered. "Guilty," Anna confessed from the doorway. She dropped her bulging graffiti-covered backpack at her feet. She wore black Converse high tops, black jeans, and a faded black Edgar Allan Poe t-shirt. Dyeing her chestnut brown hair black was where they had drawn the line. Not until you turned 16, Claire and Paul had agreed, hoping against all odds the phase would pass by then. Much to Claire's chagrin, the pretty 14-year-old still topped off her goth look with thick black eyeliner. It made her feel like a failure in the parenting department. But they'd tried everything from hypnosis to taping her fingertips to get her to stop pulling her eyelashes out. Nothing had worked. Truth be told, she was partially proud of Anna for coming up with her own novel solution for trichotillomania, and partially sad that she hadn't come up with a better solution herself. The only upside was that Claire knew whenever Anna was feeling stressed, she'd either be working on her eyelashes or sitting on her right hand to keep from doing so. Anna had always been a little high-strung, and Claire would never forget how the kid had cried almost nonstop for the first 6 months of her life. Claire blamed herself, having read numerous articles in parenting magazines over the years, suggesting the child absorbed all of the mother's stress in utero. Claire and Paul had been in college and living together in a fifth-floor walk-up. She'd worried all through the pregnancy about money, finishing school, falling down all those stairs, squeezing into her teller uniform and her wedding dress, but everything had worked out. Anna had been the most beautiful baby, non-stop crying and all. And she never stopped being beautiful, even with her death-warmed-over look. As a mother, Claire could always see her daughter's beauty right through all the layers of goth. That wasn't Anna at all. Just a disguise for her eyes. "You sick?" Anna asked, frowning, folding her arms. "Just a cold," Claire said, grimacing, and motioning for her to come and sit on the bed with them. "I've got a ton of homework." "Just for a minute. I still have to finish my costume for the dance. Dad's helping me make false teeth out of corn. Remember my English teacher, Mr. Hannafy?" Claire gave her oldest daughter her best understanding smile and let it go. "How could I tell him about work before we settle in to watch movies?" Claire walked into the bathroom, distracted, pajamas in hand. Memories of Julia lurked in every room. She stood right there. She caught herself thinking several times. It was hard not to obsess over the fact that she'd invited Julia to stay with them for several weeks while her condo had been remodeled in the previous spring. How could I have let her get so close to them? She flicked the bathroom light on, grabbed her toothbrush from the cup on the counter, and reached for the faucet. 5 or 6 strips of duct tape were stretched across the sink. A note was taped to the faucet, which simply read, "No." What on earth, Paul? After a few moments, she heard Paul clear his throat, followed by the familiar creak of the bottom step. "Did you need something, honey?" he called up the stairs a little too sweetly. "Is this a crime scene or what?" She set her toothbrush down and thought she heard him mumble something, maybe, as he tromped up the stairs. When he reached the doorway, he just stood there and stared at her, scratching the stubble on his chin. "What happened? Is it clogged?" Claire asked, pointing to the sink. Paul shook his head slowly and seemed to cringe a little. "What? Why are you acting so—" Claire spun around. Her eyes darted to the empty spot next to the sink where she'd left her wedding ring. "You didn't—" Paul immediately wrapped his arms around her from behind and held her tightly as if he were putting out flames. "I'm sure I can get it out. It's got to be down there in the gooseneck, where it'll stay as long as nobody runs the faucet. I'll get right to work on it. It'll be back on your finger within an hour," he reassured her, resting his chin on her shoulder. Claire groaned and turned in his arms to face him. She placed her hands on his cheeks and smiled. "I love you, but this is no job for the wrench-impaired. I'll call a plumber tomorrow. Nice job with the tape, though." "It's not a big deal. I can—" Claire placed her index finger against his lips. "You're an incredible father, a damn fine anesthesiologist from what I hear, and a phenomenal lover. But you are the world's shittiest plumber. Remember the garbage disposal? I am begging you, stick to what you know." "Nobody can sugarcoat it like you, hon," he whispered with a sly smile. Claire reached up and ran her fingers through his dark curls. "I need to talk to you about work." "Sure, what's up?" "Now, tell him now." Claire cleared her throat. "That note on M's shirt, her teacher thinks she needs a speech therapist, but I can't stand the thought of correcting her all the time. Remember when she stopped saying swinged and plated? I know the baby talk can't last forever, but I still think we should let her straighten it out on her own." "Really? A speech therapist?" "Well, we don't want kids making fun of her, and honestly, I'm kind of surprised we haven't run into that yet. We could talk to her about it, about talking like a big girl," Paul reasoned. "I guess so, but I really don't want to. She's such a confident kid. I don't want anyone or anything starting to chip away at her self-esteem. You know?" Claire argued. "We can wait a while, see what happens." "Now, chicken, just tell him." "Are you going to help Anna with her corn teeth for her costume?" "Yeah, I promised." Paul smiled at the mention of his stellar idea. "Come on, what's really on your mind? You seem kind of, I don't know, sad tonight. What is it? Or did you want to talk about global warming first? Or how about the economy? Or maybe your mom?" All right. Paul's phone rang. He reached into his pocket, checked the number, and held it up for Claire to see. It was the hospital. Claire sighed and sat down on the edge of the tub. Great. "Hello, yeah, who's operating? Be there in 20, he said and slipped it back into his pocket. "Head-on collision, 3 surgeries, don't wait up." He gave her a quick kiss before running out of the bathroom. Okay, she whispered and rubbed her forehead. She'd blown it. Paul? Claire called out, but it was too late. She'd heard the creak. He'd already reached the bottom of the stairs. Mom, phone. Anna appeared in the doorway, holding Claire's cell phone. Colin. Thanks, Claire said, taking it from her. I'll be out in a minute, she whispered. As Anna turned, walked down the hall to her room, and shut her door, Claire added under her breath, in case you suddenly need to share your deepest, innermost thoughts and secrets. She sighed, shut the bathroom door, and leaned against it. Hey. Hi yourself. How you doing, Sugar Puddin'? I've had better days. Did you find a good lawyer? I so did. Alex is a real pit bull, so don't worry. Hey, wouldn't it be funny if you showed up at work tomorrow like nothing ever happened? Yeah, a real riot. Marilyn would probably tackle me to the ground. What about the Halloween breakfast? Colin asked. What about it? Well, you wouldn't get to see everybody's costumes this year. I'll live. Meet me for coffee. Before you go to work? Are you mad? Seriously, Colin, that's like 5 a.m. You're meeting me for coffee at Starbucks in costume. Not a chance. Come on. You know I have to wear a costume to work, so don't let me be the only guy buying espresso in a silver lame jumpsuit. I just found you a vicious lawyer. Claire fiddled with the belt of her bathrobe, which hung on a hook on the back of the door. Anna always got Em and herself ready for school, and Colin knew it. She couldn't use it as an excuse. I don't know why you bothered. You'll never top last year's costume. True. And sewing a skeleton to the side of a lime green leisure suit is harder than you would think. Claire laughed. Marilyn was livid. You would have guessed who? I would have guessed the crypt keeper loved the Carpenters. I'm waiting, Colin said in a sing-song voice. I don't have a costume, remember? Julie and I were going as the witches from Wicked. There's no way in hell I'm going to put on a Wicked Witch costume now. Out of the two of us, I was clearly the good witch. She must have thought that was going to be so damn funny. The last laugh. Well, she's not getting it. So wear something else. Anything. But you have to make me laugh. I can't believe you're still trying to talk me into this. You need to get out tomorrow. What were you planning to do? Spend the day under the covers, worrying yourself to death? Something like that. Claire woke just after 11 p.m. Her body curled around Em's. Beneath the heavy down comforter, they'd found a cocoon of peace and succumbed to it. The TV screen bathed the room in blue light and hummed a soft electric lullaby. Claire realized what had awakened her. Em had been talking in her sleep again. Kitty food, Em mumbled. Sorry, no kitties. One doggie's enough, my little mermaid. Claire sat up in bed and lifted Em onto her lap. She used her legs to pull herself to the edge. As she stood up, she felt a sudden, inexplicable need to savor the moment. Em curled up in her arms. For a split second, she was her baby again. Claire held their daughter snugly against her chest and carried her down the hall to her bedroom. She tucked her in and fluffed her pink ruffled pillows. Claire loved Em's big white canopy bed. She'd discovered the treasure at a garage sale, badly in need of refinishing. Her mother Lynn had made a new canopy. She'd even sewn white eyelet curtains to match. I can't keep avoiding Mom, Claire berated herself as she admired the canopy. We're well into October. She's probably been in seasonal affective funk for weeks now. I've got to check on her. Maybe tomorrow. She bent down and arranged 4 or 5 stuffed pillows around her daughter's head, the way Em liked. Then she kissed her goodnight and turned off her lamp. Claire paused in the hallway. A swath of amber light spilled from beneath Anna's door. An overwhelming sense of déjà vu held Claire in its grip. She tried to rationalize that she'd seen Anna's bedroom door countless times from this vantage point, even with the same lighting and at the same time of night. Yet there was something so eerily familiar, as if she'd once stood right there and even thought the same thoughts, her heart beating the same staccato rhythm, her nostrils relishing the same sense of dog, crayons, and fabric softener. Her mind struggled with what the significance of the moment could possibly be. Claire had experienced déjà vu many times, and with each episode had come a strange sense of knowing from some faraway place, some long-forgotten place. Hold on to this puzzle piece, it seemed to advise her. Claire shivered at the thought and forced it from her mind as she approached Anna's room. She pressed her ear to the door, but could only hear Shadow lapping water from her dish inside. Claire tapped lightly on the yellow plastic sign which read, "Don't even think about it." But Anna didn't answer. Claire considered opening the door just a crack, just to see if she's fallen asleep studying. She lied to herself. The truth was that she often wondered if Anna snuck out at night. The porch roof was just outside her window. She was nearing that age, when temptation would become irresistible. But Claire always managed to convince herself it wasn't Anna's style. She talked the talk, but she didn't walk the walk. Beneath all that eyeliner, she was still a bookish girl who loved horses. Claire didn't get to tell her oldest daughter good night as often as she used to. The ritual was dying a quiet death as Anna became more independent. We don't have a bad relationship, Claire argued with herself. She's just discovering who she is. She just needs some space. I've just got to respect that space a little while longer and she'll come around. We'll be close again. It's just temporary. Blah, blah, blah. Shit, I miss her. She felt as if she pushed her, crowded her, Anna would grow even more distant. Claire couldn't afford to take that risk. She'd barely been privy to a bully texting fiasco Anna had apparently been on the wrong end of at the beginning of the school year. She'd noticed that she never seemed to use her phone. Claire tried to remind her to keep it with her for safety's sake, but she suspected it wasn't even charged when Anna would roll her eyes and sigh and toss it into her backpack. Claire suggested they get her a new phone, but when Anna declined, Claire worried she was isolating herself too much. She rested her forehead against the door. Hope you come around soon, Anna Banana. I'd like to know the person you're becoming. She walked back to her bedroom and considered turning off the white noise on the television, but changed her mind. Lying in bed, her thoughts wandered to Julia again and again. I wonder where she is. What's she doing? Who was she really? Why did she do it? Was anything she ever told me true? When she awoke, Paul was snoring next to her. Claire performed her combination back rub roll and eased him onto his side, away from her. As she stared at the ceiling, she considered waking him and telling him everything. Another opportunity was slipping through her fingers. He was in surgery all night. He's got to be exhausted. I have to meet Colin in a couple hours. Damn, I still need a stupid costume. She couldn't think of anything other than a pair of Paul's scrubs and M's Little Mermaid wig. Em would need that for her parade at school, and Claire knew she'd never hear the end of it if she showed up for coffee with Colin in such a half-assed affair. She rolled over and stared at the digital clock. She tried to come up with a better costume between thoughts of canceling altogether and sweet things Julia had done for her, which she couldn't seem to reconcile. Julia had forgone her afternoon cigarette more than once to run across the street to buy an emergency pair of pantyhose for Claire. It had been Julia who'd bought all her books on seasonal affective disorder when Claire's mother, Lynn, had admitted to barely leaving her bed one particularly gray January. The ever-growing list of suspect kindnesses made her skin crawl. Encouraging little notes, unexpected peppermint mochas, scarves, and earrings from every imaginable exotic locale. Was it all just to grease the wheels? Colin would have simply arched his perfectly groomed eyebrows in response to such a stupid question. Colin. She knew she'd have plenty of time to get back home and see the girls off to school. She was out of excuses. The clock's glowing red numbers taunted her. She grimaced, reached out and turned it away from her, but the glow only intensified as it bounced off the wall. She had set the alarm on her phone anyway, so she reached beneath the bed and jerked the plug from the socket. Her hand brushed against the bag containing Nana's chore coat and coveralls. She'd forgotten all about them. Slipping out of bed, she carried the bag into the bathroom. She took off her pajamas, kept her underwear on, and pulled on a pair of pantyhose that had been hanging over the shower rod along with a bra. She pulled the grease-stained coveralls on, zipped them up, and put on a filthy old chore coat. This is nuts. She stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. No, she finally countered as she zipped up the old chore coat. I'm a farmer, keeping my end of the bargain. She crept down the stairs, careful to skip the bottom step. The hall closet was a mess, but after digging, she found an old forest green stocking cap. Torn between elation and disgust, she discovered a mouse had chewed a hole in the side of it. She headed for the whiteboard and hung on the refrigerator and grabbed the marker which dangled from a red piece of yarn and quickly scribbled "mousetraps" in large red letters. Feeling more herself again, she shuffled through the kitchen, opened the bathroom door, and flipped the light on. She inspected the stocking cap once more, put it on with the hole front and center, and began stuffing her hair up inside. She stared at the stranger in the mirror. Not bad, except you look nothing like a farmer. You look homeless. Oh well, she still needs something. Something, though. She snapped her fingers. Claire knelt down in front of the living room fireplace. She scooped up a handful of ashes and rubbed them over her face and hands. Back in the bathroom, she smiled into the mirror. She barely recognized herself, which somehow made her happy. For the next few hours, she was going to be someone else entirely, and not the dimwit who'd been completely snowed by one of her closest friends. Claire returned to the hall closet and found one of several pairs of combat boots Anna owned. They were all a little snug, but they'd be fine for drinking coffee and crying on Colin's shoulder. She returned to the bathroom mirror one last time. She felt half crazy for reveling in the adventure, but she needed to escape her real life, even if just for a few hours. She'd never done anything like this. Maybe I can still change, become more interesting. Barely making a sound, Claire grabbed her purse and keys and slipped into the darkness of the garage. She'd managed to keep her little secret. Everyone was still asleep. She couldn't wait to tell Paul about this. It would be easier to break the rest of it to him with this as a little punchline. She made a mental note, to have Colin take a few pictures with her phone. She couldn't wait to see the look on his face. No costume party for Michael today either. I need to give Sal a call later and see how they're doing. There's got to be something I can do to help him. Maybe I can take some change over there this afternoon, pick up a little change counter at Walgreens or something. Claire opened the car door. She got in, tossed her purse onto the passenger seat, noticed a photo sticking out of the pocket. She pulled on the corner of it. It was a picture of her and Julia making a margarita toast at Mucho Gusto, after Claire had been looked over for yet another promotion. Let it go. Let it all go, Claire grumbled as she tore it into pieces and stuffed them in the ashtray. She slipped the key into the ignition but didn't turn it. The brake pedal felt odd beneath her newly acquired combat boots. She wondered if she could drive in them at all. She wiggled her toes for a moment, then reached for the keys. Oh, no. She groaned as she repeatedly turned the key in the ignition. Nothing happened. Shit. She exhaled as she glanced up at the dome light and flipped the switch back. She snatched her purse off the passenger seat, catching it on the gear shift. Its contents spilled across the floor mats. Doesn't match anyway, she huffed. She slipped a few bills out of her wallet, tossed it back on the floor mat, and stuffed them into her pocket, forgetting her phone in the process. Heart thumping, she carefully latched the car door shut and leaned against it. She closed her eyes, rolled her head back, and felt a shift within as she released a deep breath and embraced a new plan. She'd take the train, like in the old days before they had 2 cars. She smiled at the thought of being purse-free for the first time in God knew how long, and slipped back into the house. As the front door latched behind her, she realized she'd just locked herself out. But she wasn't about to lose a minute more. I'll just use the spare key when I get back. Hope it doesn't snow. I can never find that heart-shaped rock when it snows. I need a better hiding place. That's a good project for this afternoon. She sprinted into the darkness and felt so light, so free, she didn't stop running until she reached the train station 9 blocks later. Claire wiped the sweat from her forehead, smearing the charcoal. She'd arrived with a few minutes to spare. die if I see anyone I know. Panicked at the thought, she descended the stairs into the foul stench of the old L station. The odor of urine was worse than she remembered. Claire held her breath, her stomach fluttering as she walked onto the platform. She hadn't expected to feel so self-conscious amongst the pre-dawn movers and shakers in their tailored suits and expensive shoes. It wasn't so much their attire that made her nervous, but their dismissive looks. They clearly assumed she smelled as bad as she looked. With her eyes cast downward, she made her way to a bench in the center of the platform. Why couldn't there be a newspaper lying around, something to hide behind? By the time she reached her stop, she'd never felt like such an outcast. It was like thinking, this must be what it really feels like to be invisible. Descending the stairs, Claire thought she saw a rabbit dart through the foggy ditch to her left. The wind was cold and damp. She was glad she'd gone with the ratty stocking cap. Turning the collar of the chore coat up, she wished she'd found a ready scarf to match. The fog was so thick she couldn't even make out the bank at the end of the parking lot. She'd made it 3/4 of the way when she heard a hungry yowl. Claire stopped and turned back toward the expressway. She stuffed her hands into her pockets and wondered if she'd imagined it. And she heard it again. A tiny, ragged, heartbreaking meow coming from the expressway. Em had been relentless in her campaign for a cat over the past few months. She'd drawn pictures and laid out all the dog clothes she planned to dress him in. She'd even pilfered a couple of cereal bowls so she could have a food and water dish in her room, just like Anna did for Shadow. Claire hoped he wasn't as wild as Sin. Regardless, she couldn't bear the thought of him being killed out there. "Hang on, little guy," she murmured as she pulled her hands from her pockets and broke into a run. "Shoot, there's a fence. It's only waist high. I think I can climb over." Even in her baggy coveralls, she was able to hoist herself up onto the bar of the chain-link fence and swing her legs over. The sleeve of her coat caught and ripped as she jumped down. She heard another mew and spotted the scrawny gray thing a good 3 lanes in, headed right for the CTA cement barrier. She couldn't let him cross those tracks. He'd die for sure. The fog was so thick she'd lose him if he went any further. "No! Here, kitty!" She was stunned when he actually paused and looked right at her. A car flew past. The cat tensed and crouched. In a second, he'd dart back into traffic or onto those tracks. Claire slipped onto the grass and caught herself as she tried to make her way up out of the frost-covered ditch. She reached the shoulder on the 3rd try and glanced down the expressway to her left and back at the cat. He still had his eye on her. The fog wasn't as thick up on the expressway, but she couldn't make out the office buildings on the other side. Only headlights just before the cars passed her. Traffic was still light. She saw a good break coming up and waited for a hotel shuttle to blow past, then sprinted across the 1st lane. She saw the cat turn and leap for the barrier. "No!" The feline froze. She cleared the 2nd lane and was well into the 3rd when she saw concrete, sky, metal, and glass overlapping, like spinning fragments in a kaleidoscope. Her stomach lurched into her throat. Searing pain shot through her neck and seized her breath.